Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza, and I love having conversations with organizations in the cloud native computing space, and especially when it's a follow-up. And uh, the company that we're talking to today, we had them about 2 years ago, where they spoke about deployment automation, what it means, and they seemed really intent on automating deployments. In fact, it's right in their name. Octopus Deploy is the company. So they're very intent on, uh, I guess, quickening and automating the last mile of the CI/CD pipeline specifically. At least that's the sense I got from speaking to them 2 years ago. Things change fast in the cloud space, and probably, I don't know, maybe some things in their approach have changed, but maybe their focus hasn't. We're going to find out today. I have with me Steve Fenton. He's the head of DevRel and the principal DevEx researcher at Octopus. So he spends a lot of his time just going through a lot of uh, metrics and best practices and real world conversations, and he's in the trenches there about how learning about how organizations actually use uh, platform engineering, how they use GitOps, and what it looks like in the real world. And so it's going to be really exciting to hear from him some of the insights that he's going to be sharing. They have a key report that they're publishing on all of these findings that's coming out around about the time of this podcast being published. So you should definitely go and check that out if you find this conversation interesting. Um, but with that intro, let's get started with today's conversation. Steve, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So just to get to know you a bit, before we get into the good stuff about Octopus and platform engineering and GitOps, tell us a bit about yourself, your journey so far leading up to Octopus Deploy, and what you focus on at Octopus.
I've been in software development for a few decades now, and I've kind of like done most of the roles, including kind of development, the being the developer who did the things that other developers didn't want to do, like the kind of builds and test automation and deployments and monitoring,
Mhm.
and eventually management of development teams, which was quite exciting because I was moving around trying to help build up the team's capabilities to deliver software. And when I was doing that, one of the tools I bought was Octopus. I bought that a few times when I was a customer. And I also bought monitoring tools. Those were the two things I always brought with me when I went into an organization. And that's how I started rebuilding trust between the business folks and the development teams. Like, let's make everything reliable and like steadfast so that they can see us as professionals, and then we can start asking to start removing some of that like lime scale that the organization builds up in response to that terrible deployment that everyone still remembers. So I kind of did that for a while, and I was at the stage where it was going to be looking for the next gig. Where can I go next and do the next kind of rebuilding of a dev team? Um, and I actually thought um, I would actually like to go and work for one of these organizations whose tools I keep buying. So I approached Octopus and said, "Hi, I'm a customer, but I'm also very interested in coming and working there." And landed a job, which I was very excited about. I moved into the team. There was a
Mhm.
content team here. We basically wrote blogs,
Mhm.
but it's very fast paced, and my role has evolved, and we're now getting to do all kinds of research. So I'm participating in groups like the CD Foundation, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, their platform engineering community, and DORA's research effort. I'm following that super closely and involved in their community where we have great discussions. And recently we've started actually doing some of our own research to cover some of those areas that people um, haven't captured. So GitOps was the interesting one that we published a little while ago, earlier in the year, and we wanted to
Hmm.
do a dive into platform engineering because it's such a dynamic area that we felt like there was still a lot of questions around what are people doing because every platform engineering team is so different. So I have high levels of curiosity, and I get to scratch that itch by doing this original research. So yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
kind of like a
amazing.
potted history of how I ended up
Hmm.
here.
All right, all right. Yeah, sounds like you have a very measured and intentional and well-planned approach to just how you go about these things, especially if it involves research. So it's probably, uh, you know, you're not just trying to fight fires here. You're trying to really, uncover what really works, how it should work, some of the best practices and all of those, and really curious to get to know some of those things in our conversation. Um, so, wanted to get into like talking about the state of GitOps, but even just to touch on a bit of what you said about research, could you just give us a hint of the kind of methodologies you use to do your research, so that we kind
Yeah.
of get some background into like where you're coming from and how like how you get these findings?
Yeah, so we usually start off by writing down some hypotheses of what we think are true about the thing we're looking at. And the goal
Hmm.
of those is to be able to design how we do the research. And um, the outcome wise, it doesn't matter if the hypothesis turns out to be true or false, or very often it's something slightly in the middle where it's unexpected, and it doesn't land neatly on one side of the fence.
Oh yeah.
But that's fine because they help us design. And then we
Mm.
often do a set of initial interviews with practitioners just to make sure that we understand their terminology, what they're doing, so that we can form a survey that's going to help us test those kind of theories that we've got. Um,
Okay.
and then we do the survey process. For the state of GitOps, we ran a survey that we tried to get as far and wide as we could, and we got about 660 responses to that one.
Okay.
And then we do analysis. We use Python extensively for
Mhm.
this because that way it's repeatable, it's checkable. We can also give the Python and the data to other people to check our work, which is very useful. It's a
Mhm.
bit easier for them to understand than if we kind of do something in Excel or in a dashboard.
Mm.
And then once we actually have some interesting charts that are telling us strange things, we usually do a second round of interviews with people to kind of get their take on it. Like, why does the chart look
Okay.
like this? And we've got some ideas. We often find people have got very different ideas to us, and that helps us to be more balanced and say, well, actually, there are many reasons why the chart could look like this. And
Mm.
yeah, I've definitely had a lot of my opinions have been challenged by data, and I've had to change my
Mm.
mind on a lot of things. And I think that's probably the most exciting part of that process is when
Mhm.
you prove yourself wrong. And I think that's an important part of this research process is being ready to go, oh, I'm totally wrong about that.
Interesting. Could you give us one example of one of those times when you had to change your mind based on the data?
I suppose a classic one in the platform engineering space is when we talk about it in the community, we all have this opinion that platforms are optional.
Hmm.
And that's one of the ways that you measure your success is like, can we convince the developers to use it? But when we actually surveyed people, the
Hmm.
most platforms are mandated. You have to adopt them. There's no optionality in it. The organization has decided that you're going to use this platform because they're spending a lot of money on it.
Hmm.
Um, and we expected there to be problems with that in terms of like I've worked in organizations where we were told we had to use something, and that can really undermine the success of it because you don't want to use it, and therefore you
Yeah,
kind of employees have a way of these things not
resisting
turning out
change.
so well.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can technically be successful with a mandated platform as long
Hmm.
as you put in place other ways of getting that feedback and finding out if it's working. So you can't depend on that signal of people choosing to use it. But what you can
Okay.
do is you can kind of get closer to them in terms of getting their user feedback. So
Mhm.
yeah, that kind of challenged me because I wanted to be one of the hardliners on it. Platforms should be optional.
Mm.
And yeah,
Mhm.
it's technically possible to succeed with a mandatory platform, but you have to just find other ways of testing its effectiveness.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, so adoption is not really an issue if you think of it. If it can be easily solved, easier
Y-
than you think.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
right. You
interesting.
can't make it mandatory and also not listen to the developers when they have problems and paper cuts.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So I wanted to shift a bit to talking about GitOps, and I know that's something big on your mind as well. And a while back, Octopus even acquired CodeFresh, which is one of the or the key company behind Argo CD. Um, so a big update there. So clearly, you have GitOps front and center in how you approach deployment automation. Uh, a lot has happened in GitOps. You hear less of it in some pockets of the industry, I guess. Um, yeah, WeWorks, they don't exist today, but Flux is still around. Give us a few updates about what's happening in GitOps today with all of the changes that's happened in the space.
Yeah, so GitOps is a really fascinating area because the ability to use your version control system as the control plane is it just opens up so many interesting positive effects. Like you get this free audit trail, you get an easy way of looking at changes. I when cloud first came out, I was super frustrated of clicking around in a cloud portal trying to find a setting that they didn't think we would need, so it was in a really obscure place. So the ability to actually do that via a config change and commit it to
Mm-hmm.
version control and then
Mm-hmm.
promote it through my environments like a code change, that's actually quite an exciting thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we had a look, as well as doing our own survey, we had a look at the Linux Foundation data as well around that space.
Mm-hmm.
Argo's definitely pulling ahead of Flux in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the community and the activity around it. And against most
All right.
metrics, it's kind of 5 times
Okay.
Flux's number. So it kind of has 5 times more contributors, 5 times more commits, 5 times more people were using it in our survey. So there's like a ratio there. But Flux is still maintained. Although Weaveworks closed down, I know that at least one of the ex Weaveworks people stayed on to maintain it, and obviously other people from the community as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Argo's kind of pulled ahead in that time.
Mm-hmm.
CodeFresh, I'm really lucky. I get to work with people like Dan and Kostis and Idan and all these really like deep experts in this GitOps space, and I've learned so much by working with them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we're looking right now supporting Argo directly in Octopus. So their knowledge of that space is super valuable to us. And they also
Mm-hmm.
have the GitOps Cloud product that they launched a little while
Okay.
ago as well, which is in that space, and that's great for people that are all in on
Mm-hmm.
Argo, with like large numbers of clusters. And
Mm-hmm.
I was at a conference and people were telling me about these setups where they factories are now all connected together. Each factory has Kubernetes clusters running in it with services and applications, and they're all talking back to centralized data warehouses. The setups are really amazing what people are doing. And it just
Mm-hmm.
makes it so much easier than when they had to have, it was like, well, our standard build in a factory requires this specific server, and then that one isn't available anymore. So one of your factories ends up with a different server. So Kubernetes can kind of smooth all of that difference that you would normally encounter with factories of different ages, built in different eras.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Wow, pretty interesting stuff there. Would you say GitOps as an idea and just in practice, would you say it, you know, um, it's quite invaded like a lot of software shops and the way they work. It's changed the way they think of CI/CD and just automation. Would you say it's already reached quite a lot of adoption, or would you say it's still largely it needs more evangelizing, it needs more adoption? What stage is it at?
Yeah, I think we still have some work to do.
Mhm.
I would describe it as there are a lot of organizations using it for a small percentage of their software estate. So it's
Mhm.
quite common to find people with 10, 20, 30% of their services, for example, using
Mhm.
GitOps, and everything else is still using something else that they're gradually
Okay.
replacing. So
Okay.
there's high adoption in terms of number of companies, but
Okay.
inside the company they haven't yet got that real breadth of adoption. Um,
Okay.
and we also saw it was quite common for people to have the configuration in version control, but
Mhm.
they aren't automatically pulling it and they're not
Mhm.
continuously reconciling it, which means they're not getting that full benefit. So they've got something in version control, but what's actually running in production will be drifting, for periods of time. And then when they make the next change, they often then do a deployment of that configuration and bring it back to the correct state. But if it's drifted a long way in the meantime, that can then cause a problem when you bring it back. So yeah, I would definitely encourage folks to get that breadth there, get the automatic reconciliation in place, and then kind of like roll it out further. But don't ignore that reconciliation loop because I think that's super important.
All right. All right. Okay. Interesting there. Staying on the thread of adoption, but shifting gears to talking about platform engineering, you mentioned, it's not as difficult to get developers to use a new developer platform that you roll out. But talk to us about the real adoption rates once even the rollout is done. I'm wondering if there's something like a J curve that you notice in terms of adoption, what that means. Just tell us about, platform engineering and the initial days of adoption.
Yeah, there's an interesting two-axis problem. One is if you're working in an organization that has a lot of software built up over many years, it's hard for your platform to reach every tech stack and every variation that is being used in your organization. So the first
Mm-hmm.
adoption problem is working out where you can make the best impact. And a lot of organizations, they will look at maybe the newer stuff they're building and say, let's create a platform that works for that. So they might be creating a platform around their cloud native tech stack and maybe not trying to cover their older applications with the
Yeah.
platform. So there's like a
Mm-hmm.
percentage of developers that your platform is applicable to.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's getting them to use it, right? Once it is applicable, if it's optional, you kind of need to convince them that there's a benefit. And if it's mandatory, you'd probably need to work even harder to explain to developers the value that they will get from it,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure they can see what they save. And I think there's enough developers who are solving complex problems in the applications themselves that
Mm-hmm.
if you can solve problems that are tangential to that, like the builds, the test automation, how does that run during the build process and the deployments and monitoring and observability and where do we put artifacts? There's a whole bunch of problems that you can solve that many developers will be quite pleased that they have a nice path for that. So these
Mm-hmm.
golden paths can be very appealing to a developer. It's like I can focus more on my problem domain. But it's tough. And on day one of building a platform, the benefits that developers get are going to be quite low because you haven't got enough bang for their buck in there right now. So working out ways of partnering with the developers so that they can kind of shape your direction can be a way of getting them on board earlier because you can't show them what they're going to get yet because you haven't built it. So that
Mm-hmm.
the first 3 years in particular can be really hard as you're building out this capability. And then once you get over that 3 year mark, it's almost people expect to be able to just use the platform. It's embedded in the
Mm.
company. Everyone knows it exists.
All right, all right. Yeah, yeah. To talk a bit more about this, because platform engineering, we've been like the concept has been around now for a couple of years at least. And so, and it's been quite widely talked about. And so probably a lot of organizations actually have, tried their hand at it. They've got some kind of version of it. And like you mentioned, even probably mandated it for use. Um, but I'm just wondering about beyond the initial days, um, you know, let's say, organizations that probably are in this space where they feel like we've adopted platform engineering because of all we've heard and all of that. But then in reality, it's kind of lackluster for us. And it seems like we're not getting the most out of it. And seems like we've just gone through another project that we thought would help, but then it's like it's all right, it's not hurting, but it's not helping either. Or maybe, organizations that feel like, we had these big problems we thought platform engineering is going to solve for us, but we're still dealing with them even after implementing platform engineering. Talk to us about some of those stories that you come across.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a really interesting point there because I think when you first decide you have this complexity problem that platform engineering can help you solve,
Hmm.
what happens very often is that you very quickly move that complexity out of the development team and into the platform team,
Hmm.
um, which is great for the developers because they've got a whole bunch of things they don't have to worry about. But then the platform engineering team just still has all of that complexity. So no problem has been solved yet.
Hmm.
And really, to make a platform successful, you have to find ways of tackling the complexity.
Hmm.
It's not about making another team have to take on that hard work. It's about
Hmm.
stopping it from feeling so difficult. Like, how
Yeah.
do I get a change to production? Is a hard problem until you sit down and design that process and smooth the flow of that work. And again, with infrastructure, right? One of the common complaints people have with Kubernetes is, oh, it's very, very complex to kind of learn it and implement it. And it's not
Hmm.
so much that it's complex, there's just a lot of options along the way. It's
Hmm.
like you're like, okay, so I need a config file, right? It's like, well, is it just a Kubernetes YAML file, or is it a Helm chart, or is it customized? And there's just too many choices for people, and it kind of overloads you, and you
Hmm.
worry that you're not picking the right one.
Yeah.
And that's why when you kind of move that to a platform team, hopefully they can work through those decisions. And as they do that, the complexity lowers and the answer is now encoded in your organization. Like we've chosen Helm charts. Excellent. Great. That's one less thing I have to worry about, like choosing, and in tech, like choosing between tabs and spaces is hard. So choosing between customize and Helm is even harder, right? So yeah, once you can kind of encode those decisions and make forward progress, that can make a big difference for these things. So
All right.
yeah, I think it's that shift of complexity. We also need to do something to break it up and solve the problem so that it's not complex for the platform teams either.
Hmm. All right. All right. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to ask about also nuances like within the organization, how different kinds of developers use platform engineering, the internal development platform, how they use it differently, interact with it differently. Have you noticed any differences between, let's say, high-performing developers versus the others, or uh, developers that do particular kind of operations versus others? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think in terms of the performance of platforms, we definitely see there being a critical mass of features that make it successful. So on the platform side, solving a whole stream of value like a deployment pipeline end to end is what makes it useful to people to use, rather than kind of making it so that you've implemented like you bring in a tool and like make that the platform. it solves like a part of the process and it doesn't really greatly solve the end-to-end problem. So I think we need to think in terms of value streams and jobs to be done. That's on the platform side. On the development side, I think we see high success when they are able to get their changes into production with minimal friction, and where the platform supports things that maybe they wouldn't have done if they weren't using the platform. So, um, like you might get high resistance to a team that they kind of manage their build server and they've got some deployment scripts, and so they're kind of happy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the platform would also give them the security scanning that they're not even doing. And it would give them the
Okay.
SBOM generation that they're not even doing. And it would give them
Yeah. Yeah.
secrets management that they're not even doing. Um,
Neat.
yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this is when we're looking at platform adoption, we often see that developers don't see the benefit because they're happy to take care of things themselves. But that's because
Mm-hmm.
the company's policy for security isn't being applied to that team. So one of the recommendations we often make is like make the policy mandatory rather than the platform, because as a
Okay.
developer, once I have to generate SBOMs and perform DAST and SAST scanning and work out how to solve my all of these other problems, I actually suddenly really want to use a platform where it does that for me. So that's where I think the relationship gets great. And
Mm-hmm.
those developers who were taking care of some of it themselves, they are the perfect inner source partners for your platform team. So this can help lighten the load a little on the platform engineering team if you have users of the platform who can contribute back to it. Like if you're using GitHub Actions for your builds, and they find that they can improve build times by putting a cache in for the dependencies or something like that. That can then be contributed back to the platform, and suddenly all of your teams have faster builds because they're caching dependencies. So, like that's where you start getting this real flywheel effect, of the platform becomes much stronger because the developers are also contributing to it. So, yeah.
I think one of the highlights of our conversation would be what you just mentioned, make policy mandatory, not platform. I think that's quite, insightful. And I think comes from just understanding how platform engineering works on the ground. So kudos to you for calling that out. And something that I want to ask you at the start, but I missed out on, and I just realized was if you could mention some of the key platform engineering observations and statistics and findings from your upcoming report. We'd be really curious to hear about that.
Yeah, one of the interesting ones was about the frequency that platform teams go back to the developers to get feedback on the platform. Um, our expectation was that the more frequently they go and ask for feedback, the more successful they would be. Because that's kind of when you're developing software, usually getting frequent feedback is like how you get closer to the users and make the software better for them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, we found there wasn't a huge difference between monthly, weekly, and daily. It was almost like as long as you are getting feedback from them in those kind of timescales, it's reasonably similar. There was actually a little dip daily, not necessarily a statistically significant one. It does dip a little as you get to the daily. Maybe that's too frequent. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're not getting at least monthly feedback, there's a huge problem. The platforms that aren't regularly getting feedback, and by regular, it's like monthly or more, they are not successful. No one thinks they are achieving their goals. The stakeholders aren't sure they want to keep funding them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really big finding. Like, even if it's once a month, go and speak to some of the people using the platform. And if developers are busy, and so sometimes you want to go and ask for feedback, but they don't have time, but you can be strategic about asking different people over time so that each team maybe doesn't get disrupted all the time. But you can still get feedback every single month, and just like sometimes you might be saying, is this new feature helping? Have you used it? Do you need help to use it? And sometimes it will just be, have you had any problems with the platform? Is there anything which just causes friction or those little paper cuts that we could solve? And very often the users really value those paper cut fixes more than that really cool feature that you spent ages doing. So yeah, that's a big one. Um,
Oh,
and then metrics was another interesting area. Um,
okay.
there's there's a lot of variation in what people measure to say whether their
Okay.
platform is successful. And
Hmm.
in hindsight, that kind of makes sense because lots of people are adopting platforms for different reasons. They kind of have different starting problem, and platforms are the answer to many different problems. So they're all measuring different things from deployment frequency was quite popular, build time was quite popular because builds are slowing developers up. So that makes
Hmm.
sense. And after that, there's just lots and lots of different metrics that people are using that were like, this was the reason we started doing platform engineering. It might be operations metrics, or it could be failure rates, cost control, like all kinds of different reasons. But
Hmm.
one of the findings we found, as you increase the number of metrics, it tends to be associated with more successful platforms.
Okay.
But we found this interesting effect where if you don't measure anything, you literally just don't measure, there's this perception that your platform is very successful because you haven't measured anything that tells you it's not. So,
Okay.
so it's like 6 metrics is very successful, and so is 0 metrics.
Okay. So you don't want to be in the middle. Wow, that's interesting. Some quirks there. So really interesting report. What's the name of the report and how do people find it?
Yeah, the report is called the Platform Engineering Pulse Report. It will be going live soon at octopus.com/publications.
Mhm.
We're just finalizing a few of the little bits of text, making sure it's polished so it's ready for everyone to enjoy. We'll also be launching a larger scale study as well about platform engineering. So if you enjoy the report, our ask in return for your enjoyment of the report is come and participate in that survey so that we can
Mhm.
delve even deeper and find out more insights. And we'll share everything that we learn. We'll publish all of that so that everyone can kind of learn with
Yeah,
us as we discover what's going on.
yeah, that's a good takeaway. The report also mentions DORA and Monk metrics. Tell us a bit about these metrics. You kind of touched on it just now, but then just go into a little more detail about how they're different, who
Yeah.
uses which more, just any details you can give us on these two types of metrics.
Yeah, so DORA metrics, obviously the famous four are the software delivery performance metrics. And these have been found that if you're a software team and you improve these metrics, that tends to mean that you improve your organization's performance because you're able to deliver software, enable the organization. They also have some other metrics around reliability and well-being. I encourage everyone to go past those four key metrics and look at those other ones as well because they all
Mhm.
have a relationship to each other. If you can have happy, healthy people, they're going to deliver software. The software will be better. So yeah, there's like
Mm,
a good set there. There's been a lot of debate about whether the DORA metrics apply to platform teams. And
okay.
there's two interesting parts of this. One is if you're building a platform, that means that you're developing software along the way. So the DORA metrics for your platform team in delivering the platform are useful to you as the platform team.
Mm,
Um, but they might also be useful as if the platform is intended to enable software teams, it might be interesting to see whether it does improve the DORA metrics for those software teams. So there's two
right.
useful places for using DORA metrics in platform engineering.
Hmm.
Um,
hmm.
the monk
Which of
metrics.
the two, sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's okay.
which of the two do you think people actually focus on more, which gets more attention? DORA metrics being applied to how it, you know, how quickly developers can build and ship products, or they apply it more to their internal platform team and how quickly they're evolving the platform?
So I think it's really prevalent now in software teams for them delivering like software to the end users. It's
Okay.
a little less common in platform teams delivering to developers.
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage people to look at that because being able to like say there was some critical issue with the platform that could block a whole number of teams. So being able to recover quickly and get that software operating again is actually like a really good capability to have.
Okay.
So yeah, I would encourage platform teams to track their own DORA metrics. I tend to be cautious about people sharing their DORA metrics too broadly because it
Okay.
can change how people respond to them. But
Mm-hmm.
within your team, if you look at them and improve them, that's great. There's like that's not going to cause you any problems at all.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. You should continue. You were onto something there, and I interrupted
Yeah,
you.
so the monk metrics, there's an interesting issue with measuring platform engineering. Um, there's we would like something that's benchmarkable because we'd like to be able to look out at the industry and say, how is our platform performing compared to other people in my industry?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the second problem that we've all adopted a platform for a different reason. We were solving a different problem. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to come up with a single standard set of metrics like the DORA 4 keys for platform engineering, but the monk metrics give us this combination that lets us kind of get both parts of that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So three of the metrics are benchmarkable, and that's your market share, your onboarding time, and your net promoter score. But you might use customer satisfaction scores or some other version of net promoter score. And
Mm-hmm.
those ones apply to all platforms. You know, if you've got 100 developers could be using the platform and only 20 of them are, that kind of tells you where you are on a scale. It's quite comparable. The K in
Mm-hmm.
Monk metrics is where you actually look at the problems that you're there to solve within your specific organization. And in some cases, it will be we want to improve our software delivery capability. So you might use the DORA metrics as your key customer metrics. In other cases, it might be you had cloud cost control issues. And so your key customer metrics are around your cloud billing and efficient use of resources and how many test environments are permanent versus ephemeral. You know, so you design measures that help you track if you're hitting the goals that the platform was funded for. And one of the main reasons we encourage people to use these metrics is there will be a point in the next few years where stakeholders will see somewhere else to spend their money. And
Mm-hmm.
you will need to kind of show them what the platform is giving them so that they just nod and say, yes, carry on with that. We will find the money for this new initiative somewhere else, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's always going to be tempting to look at a team of 5 to 10 platform engineers and say, they could be delivering features. Like we could do this new project if we just move them onto that. And so platform engineering does need a bit of safekeeping, and the metrics are your way of doing that and presenting that in a language that the business people will understand. No one wants to be stuck on a platform that's not being maintained anymore. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah. 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 Wow. Some interesting points that you made about how platform engineering can solve so many of these challenges, and how you use it really matters. So a lot of nuance there. So it sounds like the report would be really interesting in talking about a bunch of these different things you hinted on. We're almost at the end of our conversation. A couple of questions. The first thing I want to do is do a rapid fire uh, set of questions with you, and then we'll end with your one big takeaway from our conversation. So rapid fire, are you ready? Just give us whatever comes to your mind in like the first few seconds.
I'm ready. I've limbered up and I'm ready.
All right. Cool. Um, okay, so when it comes to platform engineering and just rolling it out in your organization, mandatory or optional platforms, which one wins in practice?
Uh, I think optional is better.
All right, you're going to still stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say is the most overhyped buzzword in cloud native and DevOps today?
Um, it's probably AI. Not because
Okay.
I don't think it could be useful, but because we all think it's maybe an order of magnitude more capable than it is.
Okay, okay. Interesting. Let's say tomorrow you're dropped into a platform team and you're called in to fix all of the different issues they have. Where would you start?
So my defaults are it's always automation. It's very often
Yeah,
deployment automation and monitoring and
yeah.
observability.
All right, all right. Okay. One thing about platform engineering, maybe a feature, maybe a concept, maybe an approach that you wish more people knew about and used.
Um, all credit to Gregor on this one. He has this concept called floating platforms. And a very quick summary is you push as much work as possible down onto the tools that your platform was built on so that you
Yeah.
don't end up kind of sinking because you're trying to do too much in your platform team.
Wow, really interesting. Sounds like I'd like to do a follow-up conversation to just touch on that. Um, all right, your last rapid fire question. Name one organization that you think has a great platform engineering culture.
Um, so I don't think I can name their name, but I've been speaking to someone at a large bank in the UK,
Mhm.
and they are applying platform engineering to technology you wouldn't expect. So, like mainframes and stuff like that. And I think that's cool that they're going back and solving the tough problems. Like Kubernetes is almost easy. Mainframe platforms, that's cool, and not many people are doing that. So,
Yeah, it definitely sounds like the next frontier because you mentioned this even earlier, not just how do you enable it for your greenfield, but for your like your older legacy applications. Sounds like something to really think about. All right, that was the rapid fire section and really interesting responses there. I wish we touched on some of those in our conversation already, but we'll do a part two sometime. Um, yeah, we're winding down. Give us the one thing that you'd like to repeat from what you said that you think Bez mentioned again, or maybe you want to summarize everything you said in just one or two sentences, or maybe you want to call out something from the upcoming report and you want to tell us, go check out this section, even if you don't read the entire report. Uh, what's the one thing you'd leave us with today?
I think I would circle back to making your policies mandatory instead of your platform. And I think
Mm,
that will give you the same effect that people will then want to adopt the platform in a really healthy way. It's always better to create demand for the platform rather than
mm.
forcing people to use it because they're going to be more forgiving of any rough edges that you may have right now.
All right, all right. Wow, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That was quite an interesting and a fundamental point you made there about how to look at platform engineering and adoption and the importance of policies. With that, we wrap up our conversation for today, but it was quite an engaging and quite an insightful conversation. Thanks so much for giving it, all you got, bringing your best stuff, sharing just those key ideas that you work with, you interact with day in and day out, the things that you're building, just coming and giving us, just a dump of it all in a little over 30 minutes. It was quite a whirlwind conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a really interesting conversation.
All right. And thanks to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and got a lot out of it because there is a lot that Steve mentioned that could apply to your situation. Go and check out the report that they're about to publish at Octopus Publishing, is what Steve had mentioned. Go back and watch some of the things Steve said if you found some of these points interesting. And definitely join us again for the next episode, which should come up in about a week or so. Subscribe to us wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.